The bar was carved out of a meteor chunk and had neon veins pulsing like alien veins, casting an otherworldly glow over the crowd. A local band played on a stage that looked suspiciously like the inside of a starship's engine room, and the air smelled of ozone, fried circuits, and something suspiciously like Earth's sour cream. He'd come for the novelty, the thrill of sipping Rigelian tequila while chatting with beings that had more tentacles than teeth. One drink turned into four. Or was it six? Numbers were becoming a bit fuzzy around the edges. He remembered laughing with a group of scaled merchants who swore they could sell him an interdimensional insurance policy for a very reasonable price. One of them had offered him a ceremonial dagger. For luck, they'd said, and before he could protest, he was being pulled toward a dance floor that shimmered like liquid starlight. Kathira was there, eyes like liquid chrome, hair like dark nebulae, and a smile that could make a black hole blush. She grabbed his hand with a strength that belied her elegant armor, and the crowd around them began to chant in a language he didn't understand, but sounded suspiciously like the chorus of a 1980s synth-pop song. His head spun. He thought it was a performance, some elaborate interplanetary joke. But when the music died, the chanting continued, and Kathira raised the dagger high. He realized he'd stumbled into something sacred, something serious. She pressed the dagger to her own palm, letting a single drop of iridescent blood fall onto his skin, and the crowd erupted in cheers. He tried to smile and clap. Maybe they were celebrating his bravery at karaoke earlier. But the look in Kathira's eyes said otherwise. "Mate," she whispered in a voice that crackled like a starship's comm, and suddenly the room fell silent. Every alien eye, every blinking hologram, every floating orb turned to him. Even the holographic squirrel, still carrying what looked like a tiny plasma rifle, froze mid-step. "Wait, mate as in mate? He stammered. He laughed nervously, hoping someone would jump out and shout, "Surprise! Intergalactic bachelor party!" But no one did. Instead, the priest, a 7-foot-tall being with tentacles for a beard, stepped forward and placed a clawed hand on his shoulder, muttering something that sounded suspiciously like, "Congratulations, you fool." His vision blurred. Kathira's hand tightened around his wrist, her touch a combination of warmth and static electricity. He noticed a small, pink, fuzzy creature at the edge of the crowd. It was clapping with tiny paws and squeaking like a broken synthesizer. If the universe had a sense of humor, this was its punchline. Can I get a lawyer?" he muttered, but Kathira's laughter, deep and surprisingly melodic, rolled over the crowd, scattering the tension like stardust. She leaned close, her breath carrying the scent of alien spices, and whispered, "You belong to me now." He felt his heart stumble like a rookie pilot in a black hole. Maybe it was the tequila. Maybe it was the gravity of the moment, or the gravity generator that made the room tilt whenever he tried to stand. Whatever it was, he felt a flicker of something that wasn't fear. He looked into her eyes, saw the reflection of 1,000 stars, and wondered if maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the worst mistake he'd ever made.
He woke to the sound of something large and scaly scratching at the door, a noise somewhere between a mechanical saw and a cat hacking up a hairball. His head throbbed like a broken hyperdrive. The bed, if it could be called that, was a slab of alloy bolted to the floor, complete with a suspiciously pink blanket that smelled faintly of ozone and burnt popcorn. A quick glance around confirmed his worst suspicion. He was still on the same planet, still stuck in a room that looked like it had been designed by an engineer with a grudge against comfort. Kathira was already up, polishing her ceremonial dagger with the focus of a starship mechanic. She glanced over, her eyes gleaming with amusement and something else, something that made his stomach do a zero-gravity flip. "You survived the night," she said, voice like a star's hum, as though she'd expected otherwise. She flipped the dagger in her hand and pointed it at him, the blade catching the glow from a cluster of floating orbs that hovered above their heads like curious fireflies. "I, usually do," he managed, trying to sound casual. A holographic squirrel, now wearing a suspiciously tiny crown, sat on a shelf nearby, nibbling on what looked like a photon snack bar. Its eyes glowed with the same mischief he'd seen in Kathira's. He considered asking if it was her pet, but decided against it. Some questions were better left unanswered, especially in a place where ceremonial marriage rituals involved plasma daggers and crowd participation. Kathira tossed the dagger aside and strode over, her boots making a rhythmic clank on the metal floor. She leaned in, close enough that he could see the flecks of stardust embedded in her cheekbones. "Today we meet the elders," she announced, her tone somewhere between a battle cry and a wedding toast. "They need to see my mate." She gave him a once-over, her gaze lingering on his sleep-tousled hair, and the fact that he was still wearing yesterday's clothes, a t-shirt that read, "Earthling, just visiting," and pants that might have been considered fashionable in a pre-apocalyptic disco. "Do I get breakfast first?" he asked, because even in the face of cosmic matrimony, his stomach had priorities. Kathira raised an eyebrow, then threw her head back and laughed, a sound that made the room seem less like a cell and more like a stage. "You will eat with the elders," she said, grabbing his wrist with a grip that suggested she'd wrestled black holes for fun. He stumbled after her, the room spinning as they passed through a corridor lined with murals of battles, starships, and one particularly unsettling depiction of a three-headed space dragon giving a thumbs up. They emerged into a hall that seemed to bend around itself, the walls alive with shifting constellations. The elders sat in a semicircle, each one more bizarre than the last. A creature made entirely of shifting sand, a gelatinous being that gurgled with every word, and a humanoid who wore a hat that might have once been a microwave. Kathira introduced him with a flourish, her eyes daring him to speak. He opened his mouth, but all that came out was a squeak, probably from the holographic squirrel, now perched on his shoulder like a cosmic parrot. The elders murmured among themselves, their voices a chorus of static and melody. One of them, a blob that occasionally sprouted eyes, slid forward. "You are the chosen one?" it asked in a voice like a broken radio. He considered his answer, then glanced at Kathira. She smiled, a smile that could spark a supernova. "Sure," he said, shrugging. "I'm the chosen one." The room erupted in an applause that sounded suspiciously like the squirrel's laughter. Kathira squeezed his hand. "Good," she whispered. "Now we begin the bonding rituals." He gulped, but couldn't stop the grin that spread across his face. Maybe this wasn't the worst mistake he'd ever made. Maybe, just maybe, it was the start of the greatest adventure in the universe.
He tried to keep a straight face as the elders presented the ceremonial bonding kit. A silver orb with wires that wiggled like cosmic worms, a bottle of fizzing liquid labeled in 6 different languages, none of which he could read, and what looked suspiciously like a karaoke microphone. Kathira took the microphone first, raising it high as if she were about to announce the galaxy's worst stand-up routine. Her grin was half challenge, half delight, and he felt his stomach lurch like a shuttle on a faulty thruster. The first ritual involved drinking the fizzing liquid, which hissed like an angry star. Kathira downed hers in one go, barely flinching as it sparked blue lightning at the corners of her mouth. He sniffed his own drink and nearly dropped it. It smelled like burnt socks and a regretful college experiment. Kathira watched him with a look that said, "Do it, or I'll tell the elders you're unworthy." He closed his eyes and swallowed, and his brain exploded in a firework display of confusion and regret. "Congratulations," Kathira declared, patting him on the back so hard his teeth rattled. "You're now halfway bonded." The elders let out a noise that might have been applause, or the sound of a wormhole imploding. The second ritual required the silver orb, which they placed between them like a cosmic egg. "Hold hands," one elder gurgled, its eyes blinking in and out of existence. Kathira grabbed his hand with a grip that suggested she'd had plenty of practice wrestling star serpents. The orb glowed, wires sprouting and tangling around their wrists. A tiny spark shot up his arm, and he nearly yelped, but Kathira squeezed his fingers. "Don't worry," she said, eyes dancing. "It only stings if you fight it." He decided to embrace his fate, and the possibility of third-degree burns, and grinned back. The orb pulsed, a wave of heat rolling through him, and for a moment he felt every star in the galaxy wink at him. When it ended, the wires released them, leaving faint glowing lines on his skin. Kathira traced one with her thumb, a softness in her touch that caught him off guard. "Now you are marked," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You are one of us. Does that come with a dental plan?" he quipped, and she laughed, a sound like cosmic wind tickling the universe's funny bone. The third ritual, according to the elders, was a dance, a cosmic shuffle of sorts that involved hopping between circles projected by a holographic projector. Each circle represented a different star system, and each hop symbolized his willingness to embrace the tribe's journey. He watched Kathira leap from one circle to the next with the grace of a gravity dancer. When his turn came, he tried to match her, but ended up tripping over his own feet and landing in the wrong circle, prompting the holographic squirrel to squeak with glee. Kathira caught his arm, steadying him with a grin that said she was enjoying every second. "Your dance is unique," she teased, and he found himself laughing, the tension bleeding away like plasma from a hull breach. The elders watched, their forms shimmering with approval, or possibly confusion. He couldn't tell. At the end of it all, Kathira faced him, her eyes bright. "You have completed the bonding rituals," she said, her tone triumphant and teasing at once. The elders hummed, the room filled with the sound of 1,000 star songs. He felt a warmth inside him that had nothing to do with the ceremonial drink, and when she pulled him into a quick, fierce hug, he hugged her back without hesitation. Maybe the galaxy had a sense of humor after all. And maybe, just maybe, he was okay with that. He barely had time to savor the afterglow of the bonding rituals before Kathira dragged him down a corridor that twisted like a hyperspace wormhole. She held his hand with the same fierce grip she'd used during the bonding, part support, part challenge. The corridor buzzed with energy, tiny lights flickering like curious fireflies, and he half expected one of them to start singing karaoke. "Where exactly are we going?" he asked, his voice echoing as the walls shimmered with star charts and alien graffiti. A cartoonish depiction of a three-eyed frog with a rocket launcher made him snort. Kathira shot him a sidelong glance that said, "You'll see," which given recent events could mean anything from a surprise party to a death match against a plasma hydra. "We have a situation," she said, words clipped, but eyes sparkling with mischief. "The neighboring tribe, the Glimmerlings, are demanding tribute. They're not known for subtlety." She paused to grin, a grin that could launch 1,000 starships or short-circuit a novice's heart. "We have to negotiate, or at least stall them long enough to come up with a plan that doesn't involve feeding you to their ceremonial lava worm." "Wait, lava worm?" he asked, tripping over a loose tile that shot sparks into the air. "That's a joke, right?" She gave him a look that suggested she was only half kidding. "Depends on the day of the week," she said, and he couldn't help but laugh. Even if it was gallows humor, it felt like the universe's way of reminding him that his life had become an interstellar sitcom. They entered a chamber that looked like a cross between a starship command center and a cosmic nightclub. Screens floated in midair, showing feeds of ships orbiting the planet. A suspiciously muscular holographic squirrel flexing its biceps, and a giant blinking arrow labeled Planetary Crisis. He almost expected a game show host to appear and shout, "Spin the wheel and choose your fate." Kathira leaned over a console, typing commands that made the screens dance with star maps and data. "We've got a fleet inbound," she said, her tone shifting to a mix of seriousness and barely suppressed laughter. "The Glimmerling's flagship, the Sparkle Claw, is orbiting and broadcasting demands for the ceremonial tribute." He peered at the screen, noticing a cartoonish icon of a giant glittering claw, holding what looked suspiciously like a disco ball. "Tribute? What do they want? My karaoke skills?" Kathira's eyes twinkled. "You might be onto something," she said, the grin returning. "They expect a show of strength, a sign that we're not pushovers." She gestured to a rack of equipment, including a suspiciously shiny suit that looked like it belonged to a retired glam rock star. "Suit up. You're going to help me negotiate." He laughed. He couldn't help it. "Negotiate? I'm a tourist from Earth. My greatest negotiation tactic is pretending I'm broke at a souvenir shop." Kathira clapped him on the shoulder, hard enough to make him stagger. "Then pretend with everything you've got. The Glimmerlings respect humor, sometimes even more than strength. Besides, I like seeing you in ridiculous costumes." She winked, and he sighed, accepting the inevitable. He wriggled into the suit, which hummed with energy and made him look like a disco ball on legs. Kathira adjusted the settings and a small spark shot out of the collar. Don't worry, she said, laughter dancing in her voice. That's just the emergency beacon. It's mostly harmless. He looked in the mirror. If a floating screen that displayed his every awkward angle counted as a mirror, and couldn't help but grin. Well, if we're going down, at least we'll be fabulous. Kathira pulled him close, pressing her forehead to his. That's the spirit, she whispered. The ship shuddered as a transmission came through. The Glimmerling's leader, a being made entirely of shifting light, filled the screen. Its voice crackled like a cosmic DJ with a bad remix. Present your tribute, it demanded. He cleared his throat, winked at Kathira, and said, How about a dance instead? The Glimmerling's leader flickered on the screen like a glitchy hologram, caught between a dance party and a solar storm. Kathira's eyes sparkled with the same defiance that had drawn him to her from the start. She gripped his hand with a confidence that made his earlier tequila-fueled mistake feel like destiny rather than disaster. You ready for this? She asked, her tone half battle cry, half cosmic prank. He cracked a smile, the disco ball suit humming softly around him. Ready as I'll ever be, he said, even if his knees felt like they'd borrowed the local star's gravity. The leader's light form swirled, voice dripping with exaggerated menace. Tribute or annihilation, it intoned, like a B-movie villain with a questionable sense of timing. Tribute? He asked, adjusting his suit's holographic belt buckle, which looked suspiciously like it could double as a karaoke mic. How about a performance instead? The leader paused, light tendrils quivering in what he assumed was confusion. Kathira leaned in, her grin as sharp as a plasma blade. Show them what you've got, my mate, she whispered. With a deep breath, he launched into the most ridiculous dance routine he'd ever attempted, hopping from one foot to the other like a malfunctioning gravity drone, arms flailing in a rhythm that would make any cosmic DJ weep. The suit's holograms kicked in, projecting rainbow sparks and tiny asteroids that circled him like excitable planets. The Glimmerling's leader blinked, literally, and a ripple of laughter, or something close, emanated from its light form. Kathira joined in, her movements fluid and fierce, blending warrior grace with the humor only she could pull off. The crowd of elders, warriors, and even the holographic squirrel watched with rapt attention, some covering what might have been their ears or their sensory receptors. The leader's voice changed, softer, as if it had just discovered the galaxy's greatest joke. This is the tribute? It asked, its glow dimming to a soft pink. He paused mid-step, sweat dripping from his hairline, and shot Kathira a look that said, Are we seriously going to win a galactic conflict with interpretive dance? She laughed, a sound like starfire, and squeezed his hand. It's not about strength, she whispered. It's about showing them we're more than just warriors. We're alive. We're joyful. We're unpredictable. The leader's form settled into something vaguely humanoid, its voice almost gentle. Your tribute is accepted, it said, and he nearly fell over in relief. You are most amusing. With that, the transmission ended, leaving the room buzzing with laughter and disbelief. Kathira pulled him close, eyes shining like twin suns. You did it, she said, voice low and warm. You saved the tribe. You saved us. He grinned, arms wrapping around her as relief flooded him. I guess dancing's good for something after all, he replied, heart hammering with an excitement that felt like destiny. The elders approached one by one, offering nods and what might have been blessings or insults. It was hard to tell with beings who communicated in static and smells. The holographic squirrel scurried over, clutching a tiny trophy shaped like a dancing star. He took it with a laugh, holding it high. Looks like I'm officially the galaxy's worst and luckiest husband, he declared. Kathira threw her head back, laughter echoing through the chamber like music. The best husband, she corrected. And for the first time since he'd stumbled into that bar on that fateful night, he believed her. He'd come to this world a bachelor, a tourist with no clue how to navigate star maps or cosmic rituals. Now he stood beside a warrior who had claimed his heart, a tribe that had accepted his ridiculousness, and a galaxy that somehow had found his dance moves worth saving. Maybe the universe wasn't such a bad place after all. Maybe, just maybe, he'd found a home among the stars.